Let's talk about movies. Today we're sharing our thoughts on the BAFTA-nominated The Company of Wolves, which is a 1984 fantasy horror from director Neil Jordan. Chris is here. We saw Neil Jordan yesterday, didn't we?
We did. I saw you, which was obviously a treat, and then I saw Neil Jordan, which was also a treat.
That's a really nice way to start this video, by the way, saying that it's a treat to see me.
You know it's downhill from here.
So firstly, I have to say thank you to the guys at the Irish Film Festival, because we went to the View at Piccadilly and we saw The Company of Wolves. I can't believe you've never seen this film. It's a classic. Chris, where have you been?
Well, in 1984, obviously, I was listening to an awful lot of Hazel Dean records and dancing around my bedroom pretending I was on poppers. For some reason, it just wasn't on my radar, really. I guess I was probably a bit young, to be honest. I'm not as old as you. So I would have been too young to be watching it when I was 14.
I'll have to just announce to the viewers that you are actually older than me.
Today, I actually look older than you, but normally I don't, obviously. It just wasn't on my radar at the time, and I just never got around to watching it. And so it was a real treat for me to see it in the cinema, kind of as intended on a big screen. Obviously with Neil Jordan, that was pretty exciting as well. Yeah. So yeah, it was really fun to see it, in a cinema for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I've never seen it on the big screen. I remember seeing it when it came out and really liking it when it came out, and I've seen it probably once since, when it was shown on Channel 4, probably over the years. I mean, that is probably going back 20 odd years. But anyway, it was nice to see it on the big screen. And it was good to see Neil Jordan doing a Q&A before the film was shown. So this was made on a budget of $410,000, which is nothing. I mean, even when you think about back in the 80s, that is a really low budget. And I think it made double. So in the States, I think it made $4 million. Over here, I think it made £1 million. So it made the money, and it's critically acclaimed. Lots of people love it. It is a film within a film within a film. I mean, we were talking about this afterwards, because that can be regarded as a bit of a head I think, for a lot of people, because it's quite not dystopian, but it's very, well, I suppose it is a big fantasy film rather than a horror film.
It's a proper fantasy, and it's really dreamlike, and it's really kind of stream of consciousness, and things flow, and that's done really well. It's like this enormous fantasy onion thing where all the layers just go, every time you get a layer peeled off, you're like, oh, okay, now I know what's going on. And then 30 seconds later, another layer comes off, and you're like, oh no, I've got no idea what's going on. And it just keeps going like that, doesn't it? And it's, I've got to be totally frank, that's not my idea of a good time. But, it was really well done, as a fantasy film, and is that kind of, as you say, film within a film within a film. And actually, to be honest, it's fairy tales within fairy tales within fairy tales, or fables within fables within fables. It's kind of layers of kind of fables that you're familiar with. So there's loads of little bits where you kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I know what that fable is, I know what that fairy tale is. And then, as I say, 30 seconds later, it's something completely different. So it's pretty trippy.
It is very trippy. It's a dream about werewolves and little girls and, dark forests. I mean, I think Robert Smith would have loved this at the time, because A Forest came out, 4 years before, and it was a very similar story when you think about the song.
Yeah, I mean, don't stray off the path is what she kept being told. And of course, every time she went in the bloody forest, that's exactly what she did. And you're like, exactly. Girl, what are you doing? In the Q&A beforehand, it was really interesting hearing them talk about how the film was made. And obviously it was way before CGI and special effects, or not special effects, but kind of CGI effects and stuff. So they were telling us about how the sets were all made. They were all like real physical spaces. And there is a real payoff for that, actually, because, you're really immersed into these environments. The forest is very forest-like. I mean, they did confess to a little bit of bonsai tree in close-up action occasionally when they were making the film. But, it's a very believable physical environment, which, if you think for a fantasy film, is actually pretty hard to do. So the real physical environment really does that, actually.
So we've got Angela Lansbury, and when her name came up on the screen, you gasped. It was quite an excitable gasp, which was quite entertaining. David Warner's in it. Sarah Patterson, she makes her film debut. I think she was like 13 or 14 at the time when she auditioned for this. So it was her first feature film. I know that she was very excited at the time to be in this. And yeah, I think she does a really good job, considering she's quite a young actress. But the screenplay was originally by Angela Carter. I think it was a short story, and Neil Jordan and Angela Carter developed it, so it became obviously the feature, the screenplay. The cast then, Danielle Dax. I mean, no Hazel Dean, but we have got goth icon Danielle Dax in a very small role.
As opposed to goth icon Hazel Dean, obviously. Yeah, I mean, tiny role, and I got to say, it irritated me that she was meant to be getting from like one place to another, and she was just darting about. Did you notice this? It was really bugging me. She was
it was amazing darting though. She was like obviously nude, like, yeah, but she had massive hair.
She did have massive hair
Danielle
because
Dax?
It wasn't visible. I mean, yeah, incredible cast. You know, you kind of almost every scene, you know, somebody new appears because it's that kind of a film, and you're like, oh yeah, God, I know that and that person, and you know, loads of kind of not sort of necessarily like really famous big actors, but people that you've definitely seen in things. You know, it's kind of wall to wall talent. Really loved the collection of great actors. Didn't really love the acting. I mean, great actors generally act quite well, but this is a bunch of great actors acting pretty poorly, in my view, actually, a lot of the time. So that was a disappointment for me. Lansbury, I mean, Angela, we got to speak. She was like a pantomime dame. She was like a drag queen. She was just like a sort of drag queen in a provincial gay bar, hamming it up. I mean, not that I've ever been to a provincial gay bar. I mean, you obviously you spend all your life in them, but you know, I mean, she was just like this panto dame, and I was just like, wow, you know, you're meant to be this legendary actress, and here you are. I mean, just dreadful. I mean, just dreadful.
Oh no, it was fabulous because she provided the comedy, because there wasn't much comedy elsewhere. Although, I suppose when you think about the nature of this film, it being completely nuts, you could actually laugh along to some of the scenes. But yeah, you've got Brian Glover, who of course was in An American Werewolf in London. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff up until his death, I think, in the 90s, wasn't it? Late 90s. So we got David Warner, who was in The Omen and Titanic and Twin Peaks. And also, you've forgotten Terence Stamp.
Yes, he rolls up in a Rolls Royce at one point, doesn't it? It's like, hi, I'm Terence Stamp.
So he played the devil, didn't he? He played the devil, or the devil incarnate. I suppose it was, yeah, he appeared, and I think originally it was meant to be someone else. I think it was meant to be from
Divine?
New York. No, the artist from Pop Art.
Andy Warhol?
Andy Warhol, I think, was... he'd agreed to do it, but I think he wanted to shoot the scenes in New York, and I don't think logistically it was possible. Can you imagine him in that role? That would have been completely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's wall, like I say, wall-to-wall talent. In my view, having a bit of an off day, all of them together collectively. Angela Lansbury, she took the biscuit for me, I'm afraid. Yes, that was
she wins the award. So the plot is a teenage girl, essentially a teenage girl in a country manor, falling asleep while reading a magazine. And you pointed out, I mean, this is so camp. You pointed out the picture of Tracy Ullman behind her as she's sleeping. She's got it just above her bed. And you were like, that's so 80s.
Places. I mean, come on. Who doesn't love Tracy Ullman? A poster of Tracy Ullman above your bed. I mean, not even I had a poster of Tracy Ullman above my bed. Not even I.
I'm just wondering if that disturbing dream is because she had that picture of Tracy Ullman up there.
I actually think it was because she had really, really glossy, bright red lipstick on as a sort of 14-year-old, and that you're a bit like, really?
Yeah, that was kind of weird. I did think that, actually. I don't know whether that's aged that well. When you compare, you know, films obviously made now, that wouldn't be the case. It's almost like the Mini Pops taking over again, isn't it? Do you remember the Mini Pops? That Channel 4 show with the kids miming, or they were singing to pop songs, weren't they? They were dressed up as
They did really bad cover versions of really bad pop songs with really bad choreography, and I think their managers and all the adults around them are basically in prison since.
That was so creepy. Even at the time, I thought, no, this is just wrong.
Yeah. Definitely.
Kids dressed up as adults. Yeah, it was kind of pageant, wasn't it? Pageant stuff.
Scary.
But anyway, this dream is, you know, a disturbing dream that involves wolves prowling through the woods and below her bedroom window. So she's there. You see her sleeping, but obviously you go inside the dream. You go into what she's seeing in her dream, and it's. Yeah, there's another dream inside that, or another story inside that. So, like you were saying earlier, it is kind of three stories, I suppose. Three stories told in different time zones.
300 stories. I mean, it's layer after layer of stories, because, you know, you're in the dream, and in the dream, for instance, you're in the dream and somebody in the dream is relating a story and says, oh, and there's this story I should tell you about. It is in a dream, so we're already like 3 deep into this. And then halfway through that dream, somebody in the story in the dream will say, oh, by the way, once upon a time, and it's like suddenly you're 4 layers deep into story. It's like the once upon a time got used about 1,000 times in that film because everybody was telling a story at some point or other.
Okay, let's come on to the effects. The effects are very 80s, and I mean that in a good way, because I think there are so many films that came out in the 80s that I don't know whether it's because you've grown up watching them, or it might be a mixture of it actually, that you do think they're really good films, and they are good films, but they have... I mean, I said it to Jeremy when I came back last night, and he said that's not very complimentary. I said it has a certain charm, and he said that's not very complimentary. I meant it in a good way, but it does have a certain charm.
It does have a certain charm. I mean, one of the things that happens to me when I watch a film of this kind of vintage is that I think, I wonder what this would be like, you know, if they made it now. You know, how would you make a film like this now? And actually, I'm kind of kicking myself. There was somebody in the Q&A asked a question similar about effects, I think, but they didn't really ask what I wanted to know, which is, you know, if you made this film again, Neil Jordan, you know, how would you make it today? You know, what would it be like today? Would it be more contemporary themes or whatever? You know, how would you do it? And in a way, there's something sort of timeless about a fantasy film, because obviously it's set in some mythic time. But unfortunately, the way that fantasy is depicted changes over time. So it's quite an 80s depiction of fantasy. There's a lot of frills going on. There's quite a lot of rouge, I noticed.
It's like a Duran Duran video, isn't it?
Not just on your face.
Or Adam and the Ants.
It's kind of like the Stand and Deliver video, actually. It's kind of like that in a lot of places. Parts of it are given away by the time it was made, you know, but lots of it isn't, actually. And I think lots of the sort of forest scenes and that kind of stuff, you know, actually are very sort of timeless in a way and very kind of fantasy. But yeah, unfortunately for me, a lot of the production and fold in, you know, a lot of the performances, which I think are probably because a lot of the actors came from theatre backgrounds and they're always like really exaggerating their gestures and stuff. It all really dated it for me, actually. It seemed like a film from 1984. That
time period, I suppose, like you say, people had come from theatre, or, you know, they come from that 70s background as well, because obviously this was 1984 and a lot of those older actors were still quite well-spoken and quite thespy, which I think is quite charming, because it's completely different now, because of course people had that merged experience, I suppose, where they're not necessarily as well-spoken, but they're still professional. Voices did sound different.
They did, and actually one thing that sort of irritated me, but actually on reflection has just intrigued me, is the use of accents and speech in the film, you know, because let's go back to Angela Lansbury just one more time.
Was she Irish?
What was it? Well, you said Irish. I thought she was meant to be Scottish. I mean, whatever she was trying to do, she wasn't doing it very well. So whatever accent that was supposed to be was whatever she was doing. There were quite a lot of sort of plummy English accents, which again, because of where the actors have come from, you can kind of believe that. Then there was a couple of kind of rural accents floating around, and a little bit of American here, and all sorts of things. And actually, to be fair, I'll be generous here. You know, it's a fantasy film, and maybe the idea is people have got different accents because it's a fantasy and it's a dream, or it was just ridiculously inconsistent and nobody could do an accent for long enough to be consistent with anyone else. I don't know, but yeah, all over the top.
It was a bit Derek Jarman in parts as well. I think that scene where they're all eating dinner and there's one woman chomping on the chicken, and it was really gross. I love that scene so much. That's one of my favourite scenes.
That scene gave birth to one of my most succinct review phrases that I will be wheeling out in this series, which was dogs in drag, because that's how that scene ends up. You know, yes, okay. Sorry. When I say dogs, obviously, as far as the film's concerned, they're wolves.
Wolves,
but they're not.
Don't spoil the illusion. You said that at the end. I was like, don't shatter the illusion. I'm in a fantasy world. Don't tell me they're not wolves.
They were dogs. And they end the scene in drag, basically, which, you know, is something I've never seen before. But, you know, dogs in wigs, dogs with earrings, dogs in ball gowns. Never seen that before, so thank you for taking me to the cinema and showing me that before, because I've never seen that before. But yeah, Dogs in Drag.
They were brilliant, actually. They were better than some of the actors, actually.
Their accents were a lot better
human
than
actors. They were actors. They just weren't human. The huntsman was played by Micha Bergese. I think it was his first acting role, because I think he was a dancer. And, I mean, he had big arms. My, what big arms you've got. And, I think he got the mannerisms down to a T. You know, he did look very wolf-like when he was turning his head. You know how dogs do that when they're listening to something? I thought he was great.
Yeah.
No?
You're cutting him way more slack than I would, obviously. If I was doing this review on my own, it would be over by now. But look, yes, I didn't know it was his first acting gig, so I'll cut him a little bit for that.
It's one of the best scenes where he transforms.
Yes. Let's talk about the transformations.
And Angela's head. I mean, spoiler, but yeah, Angela's head does go flying and breaks like porcelain.
Yeah, and to be fair, that was her finest moment in the entire film. I thought,
she didn't say a word, though. There's no Scottish accent.
No terrible accents. Yes, the transformations and the monsters are actually, again, considering the time, the effects.
Iconic.
The transformations, because I think it happens twice in the film. And really scary and kind of visceral, you know.
Stephen Rea, when he's peeling his face off, that's just grim. I mean, I could see you squirming when that was happening.
Yeah, that was pretty nasty, I thought. And, you know, it kind of unusual for a film of that pedigree, of that vintage, rather, to have that kind of effect, because, you know, that was pretty graphic. It was very, very strong.
So it's Chris Tucker. He did the makeup for John Hurt in The Elephant Man, which, David Lynch, brilliant film. He devised the effects showing the men turning into wolves. You've got to be really clever to know what you're doing, I think, without it looking schlocky. When you think about other films like The Howling and American Werewolf in London, they were done kind of differently, those effects.
But they were very convincing, the effects. They were very graphic. And when you read that in the context of the whole film, you know, little girl in a frilly dress tripping through a forest, you know, it's all very lovely. And then the next second, you know, somebody's face is getting ripped off, and really quite graphically. If the effects were left to your imagination, or were sort of played off screen, or were not so graphic, that wouldn't have been anywhere near as effective. And I think the effects were really helpful, because it's a gruesome subject, you know, that there are these kind of werewolf-like people roaming the earth and inhabiting this forest and invading people's dreams, and you kind of needed that level of graphic depiction of those things. It needed to be horrific, and it was, you know. I think those transformations are horrific. Yeah,
I thought they were really effective, and I think even looking back, and this film is, 40 years old? 84?
You need to go.
Yeah, 40 years.
Older than that. No.
Yeah, it's 84. 84 when it came out. So 40 years. And that's a long time, and I think it's held up really well. I mean, I know we have different opinions on this. I still love it. And in fact, I think I like it more now I've seen it recently.
There's always going to be a market for films, books, music, culture, whatever it is, that takes you back to a particular time in your life, you know, and these things can be fairly personal. I think we all fall into tribes. I think there'll be a bunch of people out there who loved Company of Wolves at the time who would love to see it now. I just wasn't one of those people. I was, like I say, I was too busy dancing to Hazel Dean records. The films that I love from 1984 won't be the same ones that you love from 1984. But, you know, we could have gone to see one of the films that I loved last night, and you could have just been sitting there yawning all the way through it, or being rude about it, or whatever.
I'm never rude.
Which is basically what I did last night to the film that you really love, because it just wasn't the film that I got at the time. And I think sometimes those things, the point I'm trying to get to slowly is that, you know, if you loved something at the time, it's kind of difficult not to love it. You know, you'll always have a place in your heart for it. You might not agree with me that they're great films, because you weren't on the sofa with me watching them, thankfully, because that would have been weird.
We could have played with Rubik's Cubes together, and
I could never do a Rubik's Cube. I used to throw them across the room in anger because I could never do them.
You were quite angry last night, to be fair.
Was I?
Yeah. I'm just going
angry.
to tell everyone, when I got that call from you, and you were at St James's Square, and you were saying, "Where are you? I'm on the south side, come and meet me." You said, "I'm angry, I'm ill, I'm fed up." And I was like, wow, that's a really great, positive, uplifting way to start the evening. And we haven't even seen the film yet.
But to be fair, the film cheered me up. I was in a much better mood by the time I'd seen it.
Excellent. So it's done its job. It's entertained.
Yeah.
Give it another star.
I've already given it one more in my mind than I was going to.
The power of the review. Let's do the verdict.
Okay. I was going to give it 1 star.
What?
Because it's just not for me. I don't like that genre of films. I don't think it's not aged as well as lots of other films from 1984. I love this aghast look I'm getting here. It's
star?
No, I was going to give it 1 star. I'm actually going to give it 2 stars because you filled in some gaps for me about people's first performances.
It's not much of an improvement, really, is it? It's still below average.
Correct, it is still below average because other films from 1984 you can sit and watch now, and they're not dated and they're not badly acted, and they're better films. So I'm giving it 2 out of 5, and I'm being generous.
Well, I appreciate your honesty. I think you've got it wrong. You are wrong. And for anyone who hasn't seen The Company of Wolves who's watching this, don't be persuaded. Don't go down that road.
Okay, but before you do your score,
angry man.
I'm not bitter. Angry. Before you do your score, yeah, right. So let's think about this. Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I've not seen it.
I've seen
The Breakfast Club, and I've seen Pretty in Pink. I haven't seen Ferris Bueller.
It's over.
Okay, so my verdict then for The Company of Wolves is 4 stars. I think if you'd asked me back in the 80s, I would have said 3, because I remember at the time being not disappointed, but I wanted it to be more hardcore. And it's weird because my view of horror films at the time, I wanted gore, I wanted violence, I wanted thrills and scares. This didn't really scare me much at the time. I thought it was quite weird, but I think it's more weird now looking back, and I guess that's in hindsight, being adult and kind of appreciating the trippiness of it. So yeah, I'm going for 4.
I think there's a familiarity vote that happens here. I think that when you love something, when you saw it at the time, when you love it and you've watched it for many times since, you just love it. There's a nostalgia thing at play. And believe me, I'm the most nostalgic person you know, so I totally get it. But, my nostalgia and your nostalgia are different nostalgias, and that's why we've scored completely differently.
Yeah, but I never really thought it was one of my favourite films at the time. I mean, I enjoyed it as a kid, but it wasn't like up there with, say, The Evil Dead or Halloween or, Nightmare on Elm Street. It was kind of okay, but now I appreciate it more. I think that little world that he created as well, using models, didn't seem jarring. It seemed to fit the rest of the sets.
In a way, we're reviewing this film quite differently because I think you're reviewing it as something that you've known for 40 years. We sat down in the cinema last night and you started talking about the film and you were saying little things about it and you twigged very quickly that I knew nothing at all about this film. Nothing at all about this film. And I was really excited to see a film, of this age that I didn't know anything about, and I went into it open-mindedly.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I know you weren't feeling well, so I appreciate you coming out and braving the winter months, because it was pretty grim last night as well. The weather was cold and wet.
It was a tough night at the festival, I expect, because it was probably a pretty cold night. So, yes, thanks again for them inviting us, and thank you for taking me to see a film that I'd never seen before, because I'd never seen it before.
It's a great festival as well. Check out all the details down below, because we'll put links to, next year's festival, because it ran for, 3-4 days.
It's a great cinema, actually, because it's got loads of medium-sized screens like that, and that there are kind of, 4 or 5 that size, I think, and a big one, I think, maybe. I think there's this one that's like bigger. Yeah, great cinema, absolutely, yeah.
So check out all the details down below. Let us know if you've seen The Company of Wolves. I know it's 40 years old, so I'm sure someone's got a few things to say, maybe disagreeing with Chris and his very harsh verdict, his score 2 stars, but you did upgrade, so we're grateful for
Likewise, let's just, for the sake of balance, as if this was the BBC, can we just say that other people may watch it like I did from now, having never seen it before, knowing very little about it, and being completely horrified by Angela Lansbury. I just despair.
Yeah, but, horrified for the wrong reasons, not for the right reasons, because it's a horror film.
Yeah, that's true.
Talking of which, great playlist above us, above our heads now, which is scary films for the wrong reasons. Good to see you, Chris. Bye. I'm just going to keep doing this.
Yeah, I've been slightly hypnotised. I'm feeling dizzy.